This is the CreaseCast.
All right, everybody, welcome. CreaseCast number 161 coming at you. I'm not in the Crease Cave, but Lachlan is. We actually have positivity to talk about. The first big, giant piece of news. Your Vancouver Canucks TikTok account for the CreaseCast is up to 8,600. Wait, was it 12,000 views right now?
So last time we talked, a little bit of backstory. We have a TikTok account that I barely post to. We posted twice before. We've had it for about a year. I just never used it up until like last couple weeks, just once to like promote the Spotify videos and everything that we have now. And then the other time I posted that clip from the Canucks social media account of like Connor Garland jumping on Thatcher Demko after they won the shootout over Boston. And with the caption, just Cody and Locke realizing they don't have to do depressing CreaseCasts anymore. And it was just a very niche joke. I didn't really care. I just wanted to make it for Twitter and for our Instagram as a little funny. Apparently I hadn't checked it for a while. Yesterday it was at 2,000 views and I was like, oh, this came out of nowhere. This morning I checked, and I think when I sent it to you, what did I tweet? I sent it to you when it had
12. You sent it to me at like 8,600 or something like that.
Yeah. Oh God. It was something ridiculous. Yeah. It was like a ridiculous amount where, it was like 8,000 or something.
Yeah.
Right now. Our video now is at 21.6 thousand views on TikTok.
That's nuts, because like when you sent it to me, that was only like 7 or 8 hours ago. Not even.
Yeah.
Like that's quite the bump. We got the bump from the people's positivity on the Vancouver Canucks is carrying our TikTok account.
Yeah.
So thanks, TikTokers. I'll never ever use your app or view it or, but we appreciate you for supporting us. That's great. Can you monetize TikToks?
I think you can when you get to like a certain like follower
like a billion
threshold.
Followers.
Well, yeah, because there definitely is money in there. Like, I mean, you've seen like there have been like, what are they, the D'Amelios, or I think are like the most popular people on TikTok or whatever. I don't follow any like popular TikTokers. The only people I follow are like either like YouTubers who happen to have a TikTok that I know about that I think is funny, or like just other hockey accounts. And but from what I can tell, apparently it's supposed to be like the whole point of it is that it's kind of like it's Vine, but it's much easier to be monetized than Vine was, because I guess that was like a huge critique for a lot of like the most famous Viners, is that you couldn't really make much money off of that platform, but you can off of this one apparently, if you get big enough. We have 25 followers now on that account. We're at 21,000. And as I refresh the page, it's just, 21,000.
It's now at 200,000.
Okay. It is crazy how quickly, especially considering that I posted that, I think when was the Bruins game? The Bruins game was
3 days ago.
Was like Thursday, Friday, I think. And so I posted it that night. And it's only shot up in like the last day or two is when it literally went from about 2,000 or something yesterday to 21,000 today.
Yes. So thank you to the TikTokers for getting us to 20,000 over 3 days. I'm assuming there is an account over like somewhere hidden there. You can't see them, but like every time there's a Canucks win, they like repost our TikTok, and then it gets like a shit ton of traction. Like it's like every W or whatever, it just gets reposted. Kind of like how like people like retweet their own tweets, and then they get like another batch of people like looking at them every like once in a while. It's probably the same idea. But if not, then that's great, because that means that we got pull, man. We got TikTok pull. We got the cred.
We got TikTok Pullman, which is Tucker Pullman's brother.
Colton Pullman's his brother, actually.
Colton Pullman. Isn't he on The Bachelor? No, that's Colton Underwood. That's my bad.
He's a Netflix special now.
He does?
Yes, it's called.
Why?
It's called Coming Out Colton or something like that. And
it's okay.
It's about his journey to understanding his homosexuality. And
okay. I thought you were gonna be like,
I think it's like
him, like it was just, he just happens to have like a Christmas special or like some like
well,
he's just like singing now or like
I did notice that it did like his special came out like kind of like lumped in with all like the Christmas like movie batches. I guess it's like the target audience is like, okay, like single female at home who watches The Bachelorette is going to watch a bunch of Lifetime Christmas movies, and then we'll slip in the Colton Underwood story. Maybe people read it and or watch it, and they feel better about themselves because he's happy embracing his new life, which is
Yeah.
good for him.
He has a Canucks connection technically too, because he was because he dated, I believe he dated Allie Raisman for a while, who also dated Tim Schaller. So there's that little Canucks connection there as well.
I knew it.
That's
wonderful.
What's your Tim Schaller number, everybody? Everybody has a Tim Schaller connection.
You know what's wild is that he's like in the AHL right now. Like only
Is he
like
playing
a
for
few
Ontario?
Years.
Is he still in the Kings
No,
organization?
he's
or
not
did
in there.
he move
Or
on?
yeah, actually, I should check that. I don't even know if he's in the AHL anymore.
I think he's for Bakersfield. He plays for the Bakersfield Condors. It looks like he's on there, but he's like not signed to the Edmonton Oilers. He's just on an AHL deal now.
Oh, okay.
Because the last couple years, it went from the Ontario Reign in 2020, the year obviously the Canucks traded him for Tyler Toffoli. The year after that, it was Wilkes-Barre Scranton on a just AHL contract, or maybe a Penguins contract, but he only played for Wilkes-Barre. And then this year, Bakersfield, 17 games played, 4 points. So yeah, he is still. You'll probably see him. You've probably seen him in Vancouver and just didn't notice.
Yeah, must have. Let's not remind the viewing audience of the Tyler Toffoli trade in an
that's a good
episode that's
idea.
supposed to be positive, because we have good news to talk about for the first time in our show's history. I want to say, because there's no way this happened last year.
No,
but we're covering a Vancouver Canucks 4-game. You heard that right, folks. FOUR 4 games straight in a row victories, and
back to back.
They're fun games, which is great. Like, they're actually entertaining to watch. Sure, they're getting outchanced, and it looks a little helter-skelter at times, but they're winning, which is nice.
Yeah,
they look happy to win and celebrate and not be miserable.
It must be nice winning games versus not winning games.
Yeah, I'm gonna get this
point
out of the way. I'm gonna get this one out of the way because I don't want to close with negativity and I want to keep this a happy episode. But Seth Jarvis and Sebastian Aho both tested positive for COVID and did not fly with the Carolina Hurricanes to continue on their road trip. For those that don't know, we are recording on Monday at 5:22 p.m. and they just played the Carolina Hurricanes last night on Sunday. So if 2 players just tested positive for COVID, that's not really a great sign for the Vancouver Canucks, who just played against Seth Jarvis and the Carolina Hurricanes. Fingers crossed it's contained and it's only just those 2 players who are affected by COVID right now, because the last thing this team needs is to go on an actual run for the first time in forever, and then it gets stopped because they have a COVID outbreak.
Yeah, it's definitely something to keep an eye on, considering that the Hurricanes played the Calgary Flames, for example, on Thursday, and the Flames game tonight got postponed.
The only one that was on the docket.
Yeah, it got postponed because they have also had a small COVID outbreak there. So that is definitely something to keep an eye on, especially you share an arena with a team for a bit. Like there's definitely going to be overlap in terms of, say, things like where the hockey bags are moving to, where players get on the team bus. Like, those are things that are going to, like, there's definitely
sharing an elevator with
an elevator. Yeah. Like, you might not. Yeah, exactly. Like, you're bound to share parts of that arena for a while, even if you're not, even if the only direct contact you're having with that other team is on the ice for 45-second shifts. Like, you're bound to come into contact with those kinds of situations at some point. So yeah, hopefully the Canucks are going to be okay and are keeping all the precautions in place. But yeah, the Canucks are looking a lot better on the as far as the hockey is concerned. And that was the big thing that I wrote about like this week, talking about how the Canucks, there's reason to be like, there's reason to get excited about watching the Canucks again, not just because of the fact that there actually feels like there's a future with the team now, versus where there wasn't last week or 2 weeks ago. It is the fact that like they're playing such a much more exciting brand of hockey now.
Yes.
And it's one of those things where the reason why they weren't playing so exciting before was, okay, the coaching staff under Travis Green was of the mindset of, okay, we got to play more structured defensively because our team doesn't have the defense to keep up with the rest of the league. So we're going to kind of play a little bit more conservatively, play it back a little bit and sit back a little bit. And and while that logic seems good in principle, the problem is that it also took away from what the Canucks were best at, which is scoring and being aggressive. It's one of those things where it's like, well, you're going to give up an insane amount of chances as it is. So would you rather do that while using your best skill, or further hindering it by making them patch up a big hole in your lineup, essentially, right? And that's kind of where we're at now, where the team is clearly they're not as any better defensively than they were the week before.
No.
But because they're not having the forwards kind of play like they are, play to try and mask those holes up, it's freeing them up to do a lot more offensively, and it's freeing them up to score more goals.
Yeah, like I think you and Jacob talked about it on the last episode, which I was not on, in which it's very clear, like Bruce Boudreau has acknowledged the fact that like the team still isn't really playing good hockey. They're getting very lucky with like incredible goaltending. Who, like, let's just jump right to it. Thatcher Demko obviously gets our infinity blocker for this episode.
God. What a week!
He got the infinity blocker from the league with his first star of the week, I think, in the NHL.
First star of the week. It's first star of the week now. It's Hart Trophy at the end of the year because, God, he's so good. Like,
yeah, he was definitely booing them this past week. Obviously, I think he had the shutout. He had a .961 save percentage in one game, a .919, and a .945. Like, just fucking ridiculous for like a 4-game run. I even joked at one point, like, Yaroslav Halak will never play again.
Yeah, literally. Well, I mean, and this is where we're back to kind of where they were. Like, you were the one who talked about how they're basically playing right now the way they did under Travis Green in the first couple years with him there, like the first 3. That's right down to the goaltending too, where they're like, okay, the goaltender's going to bail us out on a nightly basis. We know that already. So let's give him as much of the offensive help as we can to win those games, because we know he's going to show up. It's a matter of, can we get the rest of the group to show up?
Can we get the rest of the group to buy in and at least give the goaltender some form of relief? Because over the last, since whenever Travis Green took over, 2016, 2017, I think that's when it was, the team has basically, I think it might have been 2017, 2018, actually.
Let's see. It would have been, because it would have. This was his 6th year, I think. This was his 6th season. He had done 5 before.
Because ever since he's shown up, like, I mean, obviously it's a coincidence that since Travis Green has showed up, like, two-way IQ has not really been a staple or a highlight of the Vancouver Canucks team. It's always been run and gun offense, and even when he was asked about it this year, they're like, your team plays a run and gun style. And he was like, no, we don't. And it was like, yes, Travis, that's exactly what you are. And you've been playing that way for 6 years.
Well,
I don't know why you would fight against this. Like,
they weren't really playing. I mean, they
this year
run and gun this year at all. And that was why they were losing.
Ever.
Yeah, and that's why they were losing a lot of games. I think last year too. I think you could lump both of those years as kind of, because last year they were like, maybe not as badly, but like they were definitely,
they were playing a bit more conservative, I think, last year. But it was also a case of like that team just looks so defeated. Like, they could have been playing run and gun hockey, but you couldn't tell because they just looked completely checked out like the entire season. And obviously we know that's because they lost a bunch of key leaders in the offseason to free agency, like guys like Chris Tanev, guys like Markstrom, like key
Like Tyler
pieces that,
Toffoli.
yeah, like key guys that like clearly the whole team was on board to bring back the next year to try and build off the bubble run, and it didn't happen. And so, like, yeah, they could have been run and gun. They could have been a neutral zone trap team that did nothing on the ice, but scored goals. You wouldn't be able to tell because they just lost a lot. And start this year, you could tell they had invested heavily in trying to play a more defensive style. It was a complete antithesis to everything that Travis Green had coached into this team for the first 5 years. So, of course, for those players, when your coach you've had for this long is suddenly asking you to play a completely different brand of hockey that you've never played under him and it doesn't work, it's kind of like, okay, well, coach, I don't buy this anymore. And now Bruce Boudreau comes in, he's like, I don't know why Travis Green changed this. Like, it's really fun and it works out most of the time, and sometimes most of the time is all you need. And like, I don't think he's doing anything that different, to be honest. The only thing he's really done different is throw young kids on the PK. That's
Yeah.
pretty much it.
He's throwing young guys on the PK. He's giving guys like Podkolzin a chance to defend a 1-goal lead in a late stage of the game, which are things, again, that we've been asking from this coaching staff for a while, like for most of the season. Like
We were asking for it after like 4 games where we were like, okay, Pedersen's not working. Just get him on the PK and get him to try and build some confidence in his game by just
Yeah.
doing something beneficial to the team. It can't hurt your historically bad PK. So why not? And it wasn't happening. And that's where you kind of get in. Like, we won't rehash the whole Travis Green firing because like there's no point.
We already
but,
did that
like,
last week. Yeah.
yeah, but it's just like, you can understand, like, at that point after 20 games where nothing was changing and it was kind of just trying to drill a square peg into a round hole, that, okay, the coaching staff has lost it. They've lost the plot, as they say.
And
this new coaching staff kind of has a bit more. They're a bit more in tune because they're the fresh eyes. They understand what's going to work with this group, so they don't need to try and hammer the square peg into the round hole. They don't need to yet because they're winning.
it's not
It's working.
Right. And with that, there's always a shelf life with coaches and with management, because we can't also, I think we also can't ignore the fact that depending on, what the situation was with the front office as well, is that maybe is that there's always the possibility that, well, yes, the coach puts the guys on the ice. There's also the thing of, well, he's got the management team is like, oh, these are the players that you need to put on the PK as well. And these are your this is your, I don't understand why you'd put Pedersen out there. This is your PK that I have built for you, kind of thing, right? Yeah. So you never know how that goes. But yeah, like but that doesn't mean the coach can't make those decisions midway through the game. Can't make those decisions midway through the game. So yeah, you've got a new the fresh group coming in here, and that all the more reason why this reset has been so important for this team is just that, you've got these coaches and you've got a management team coming in that this is not their team necessarily. So they don't have to come in here and be like, defend these decisions because it's not theirs. Then that is why it's important to kind of shuffle things around from time to time. Even like, if something's working, that's one thing. But like, if it's clearly like there are fixes to be had and changes that could be made, sometimes there's going to be a little bit of a shelf life for everybody. And having fresh eyes on that situation can lead to better things. Like, one of the things that I've actually really loved about Bruce Boudreau so far, and as well as Jim Rutherford's first press conference as the Canucks president of hockey ops, but we'll talk about that in a bit, is just that they've been really honest with what the quality of the team is. Like, they're not trying to be like, oh, we feel this team's got a shot at the playoffs.
This team's improved. We're a playoff caliber contender. Clearly, everything just needs to shake out right. Like that, they're a bit like Bruce Boudreau, especially, is like way more grounded and real about what his roster's potential is.
Yeah, literally both of them mentioned that, hey, it's great that they're winning games right now, but that eventually the schedule is going to get a lot tougher, and that's going to make a huge difference with determining how good this team actually is. And that's a good way of looking at it. Like, you shouldn't, and you and I were kind of joking about the fact that before the show that, like, if this were Jim Benning was still in charge, we'd be talking about, like, you'd be hearing him say something like, well, the schedule hasn't been friendly to us, and that's why we're not doing as well.
Yeah.
Kind of like trying to make
COVID's
excuses for
around.
why the team isn't as good as it should be.
Yeah.
And whereas so far, like you have Bruce Boudreau literally saying, it's great that we're winning and that we've won 4 in a row, but we've gotten a bit of a luck with some decent scheduling right now, where they're winning a lot, where we're getting a couple teams, better teams who are tired.
That's like the first thing he said about the in the Carolina post game presser. He's like, "Oh yeah, they're on the back end of a back to back. So yeah, we look good against a tired team."
And that's good. And that's good that the coaches in that has that like ability to just say that about his team and be like, we're doing well, but I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, we're flawless and perfect, because that's not how you should be. Even when you're doing well, you should be always looking at, well, there are things we can tweak. There are things we can do better. That's just how life is. So it's good that they're kind of looking at it with that frame of mind, but at the same time, it is good that we can sit here and celebrate the fact that the Canucks have won 4 in a row, even against some teams that you got, obviously there's the Kings in there who aren't super great. They're still in the middle of their own rebuild. The Jets are a little bit of they're in the mix. But hey, you beat Boston, you beat Carolina. Those are still, the wins still count for 2 points. Both of those still count fully. It doesn't matter how you win them. You still got those points, and that's great.
Yeah, even if they look like shit, you still eke out some points, and your star goaltender, who I'm sure everyone in that room is very appreciative of, they see him get rewarded with the first star of the NHL. So little things, baby steps, and just kind of rolling back to your earlier point, when they made the coaching change, it wasn't like a Chicago, we're rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic type of situation. Because in Chicago, it was like Carlton was done. He was clearly done. And changing the coach was going to give them a couple wins. But realistically, Chicago is not in a competitive window or arc right now. They're ready to rebuild, basically. All their guys are too old. They have nothing in the pipeline. Their drafting's been terrible. Their goaltending's been horrendous. I think there's nowhere they can go.
I think Jonathan Toews just scored his first goal of the season, on Saturday or Friday. It was not that long ago. It's been
an asterisk. It couldn't have happened to a shittier or a better organization. We love to see how much they're struggling. This is great for us. But just in the sense, when they made the switch with the Canucks org, everyone kind of knew, leading into the season, on paper, the forward group is really good, but the defense sucks and Demko's really good. So it's going to be tough to see where the team balances out at the end of the day. Are they going to be near a playoff spot and need to trade a first round pick or a prospect to try and push over the edge? Or are they going to be a fringe team that just isn't close and needs to really consider their rebuilds for options? But it isn't as dire. Everyone even knew when they were just not losing, this team is not clearly not performing to a standard that we should expect. Elias Pettersson, right? No one's ever watching him in that first 20 games going, oh yeah, this is who he's going to be for the rest of his career.
Yeah.
If anyone did think that, oh my God,
you're giving up way too early on. You're giving up way too early on him.
You're more of a defeatist than I am, and I'm a huge defeatist, but
and it was very much a case of there was no hope you felt like there was no hope for the Canucks, but if they made a change with the people who were in charge, that you could instantly see that change come back. You could instantly see the hope on the team immediately come back. It was very much a case where it's we're doomed until they make a different choice, until they make the right choice and change things up. And now that they've done that, we're not even really talking about the 4-0 necessarily, so much as we're talking about the fact that, suddenly new voices in the room with different ideas and decisions that and the idea that they're going to make decisions that are very different from what the last regime did, that you can actually see again see where a championship team could be built out of this. It's really been that case for a while, where it's just you can totally see how the Canucks could end up becoming a Stanley Cup contender. It's just a matter of, if the wrong people are in charge of it, if it's in the wrong hands, then anything, it's not going to go anywhere. And right now it feels at least like the odds on that happening are a lot better than they
Yeah.
were 2 weeks ago.
And we even knew this like going into this season. We knew it last season when we were starting podcasting together. Like there are some GMs who are good at building a core and some people that are good at making an insulation. And Jim Benning has not been a good insulator at all. Ironically, actually, I think he started okay as an insulator when he identified Bonino, when he got Ryan Miller. Like he did pick a few good pieces to try and go for it again with the Sedins for a final run, but that was one season that he managed to pull that off. And then every season afterwards, the insulation was terrible. The moves were not rebuilding or doing enough to stockpile the cupboard or build prospect pool or anything like that. He kind of just accidentally fell into the pieces he got, like Quinn Hughes, like Elias Patterson, right? Like he's clearly not the guy that was going to ever create a network of supporting pieces that would carry this core that he has built to the next level. Like it was just not going to happen. And I think you and I both recognized it immediately when they signed Tucker Poolman to the 4-year, $2.5 million contract, or the Travis Hamonic 2-year, $6 million contract. We just
And
knew.
most importantly, when they prioritized making those signings over Quinn Hughes and Elias
Yeah.
Pettersson's contracts, like it was that case of almost like it was almost a case of like they were expecting that the young guys would step up to play for the older vets in a way. Like it was
A
almost
little
like
bit.
it was almost like a case of the young guys still have to earn, the young stars have to earn their spot, but the veterans
Yeah.
don't. Whereas now you're looking at a team where the young guys are going to, or seem to be, at least for the time being, be getting their opportunities and being given the and being given the, all right, this is your team, and it's going to be your team for a long time. We're going to start putting you in spots to play more ice time on things like the power play, on things like the PK. Like, oh my God, let's talk about Brock Besser. Like that guy went from having a really rough go to start the season, went
looking good
to
again.
looking, he's got, I believe does he have a goal in every
He has a
single
goal
game?
in every
So
game, I'm pretty sure.
he has been incredible. And that is a case of like Brock Besser is a guy who, like, oh, he can have the whole, there was the whole thing on Twitter this week of like, what is underrated mean anymore? And like how, like, if you're calling players underrated, you're saying you're smarter than people. And I'm
Yeah.
kind of like, I think underrated is like, not to rehash this a little bit, I think that underrated has come to not really mean, oh, this player, this really good player is secretly good. And no, but it's one of those things where I think the media doesn't talk about this particular player either via circumstance or by the market that they play in a whole lot, particularly like the national media, I should say. And that's what makes it an underrated. It's not that they're actually that it's a real actual secret in hockey that they're not that they're good. It's more just about how much like national like attention they get sometimes, which is why the poster child for that for a long time was Alex Barkov, because he played with the Panthers for so long, because he's played with the Panthers. Besser is another one of those guys who flies a little bit under the radar just because of the fact that they have Pettersson, they've got their captains Bo Horvat, they've got Thatcher Demko, they've got Quinn Hughes. He's always kind of like the fifth guy. He's the fifth Beatle a little bit. Like
the
sometimes.
1 year he didn't fly under the radar was last year when he finished the season as arguably the team's best player.
Yeah.
And because of that season, I think a lot of people had elevated expectations of what he would bring this year. And because he was slow out of the gate and looked like just downright like invisible, like people were like, oh, this guy's garbage, we're going to get rid of him as soon as possible, which, I mean, they still might. His qualifying offer is a lot of money, and they do not have cap to sign him to a deal above $7.5 million. So I'm not sure what they do there.
Well, if this were under the old management regime, I would be interested to see how that went. I will say, and when we get into Rutherford, I'm sure we'll talk about it a little more. Just like, I think it's so clear like how valuable he is to this team, and the fact that one of the biggest like shots against Brock Besser for for as long as he's been a Canuck, particularly like from things that we've heard about Canucks, like the previous management team and what they thought of Brock Besser, was that he couldn't carry it himself. and that he
Yeah.
couldn't do it on, and that he was like, he had to be paired with good players to be good. And lately he hasn't been playing nearly as much with say Elias Pettersson. He hasn't been paired nearly that much with him, even under Boudreaux of late.
Mhm.
And here he is. He's got 4 points in 4 games. He's got 3 goals and assists. He didn't get a point in the Winnipeg game, but overall
Bust.
he's looked bust. He had 5 shots in that game. That was the other thing, is he had 5 shot attempts. So he's getting more shot attempts than he ever did before. And he's scoring at a decent clip again. And that's despite not necessarily getting paired up with the prime players on the team. And I think Brock Besser is a better player than the Canucks had given him credit for a while. And, you know, under Boudreaux so far, it seems like he's getting that opportunity again to be like, hey, look, we feel you're something. We're going to give you every single shot we can to make you successful. And because I don't see how this team gets like to a spot where they're competing in the playoffs without a guy like Brock Besser, who is first and foremost a goal scorer. Like, he's your prime sniper at this point. And I don't know how you can't get far in the postseason without those kinds of guys.
Yeah, true enough. I will refuse to get too attached to him or his contributions, though, because, like I said, that qualifying offer means he's probably out the door. He's probably one of the first guys out the door. Like, it's just the way it's going to be.
That would be great. They'd be crazy to do that, but yeah, all right.
They would be crazy, but it's a new management. It's a new management group who, in his interview with Sportsnet 650 tonight, as I was stuck in traffic, Jim Rutherford basically said they need to make a lot of smart decisions. They need to be really careful with what they do, and they need to look at undrafted free agents out of the NCAA. They need to look at Europe. They need to basically maximize every potential avenue of finding talent, because they don't have the cap space or the picks to basically make changes happen quicker. They need to, I think he even said, like, whatever moves they decide to make are with the mindset of being a hopeful contender, a playoff caliber contender in the next 3 years. Or sorry, in the next couple of years, which is like,
but Jim told me in the off season that he's envisioned 2 years.
well,
what Jim Benning? Sorry,
is,
Jim. I should clarify. Jim Benning told me that,
yes,
because we have another
old
Jim
Jim,
now.
new
Old
Jim.
It is really funny how people, like, how media people could essentially, if they have like if they're changing their phone number and their contacts from Jim Benning to Jim Rutherford, they can just change. They just have to label it GM Jim, and it's just and just replace the number, and it still works.
It's still the same idea.
It still works. Yeah, I guess we'll just get into Rutherford now,
Let's do
because
it.
I mean, here's the thing: he's not the GM, like, per se. He's the interim guy for now.
Yeah.
And I said in the last show that I was very skeptical about him coming in, especially as an older guy, a little bit of an older, like not a new age hockey mind per se. And him coming in, but because he's not the de facto general manager who will be making all those decisions, I'm willing to give him benefit of the doubt to see what he can do a little bit. As far as like his first press conference went, and as far as what we're hearing from him right now, I like I like the potential. Like, I'm seeing I see the potential again. It's that matter of, okay, with the right decisions, I can see where this can turn into something good. And I think Harman Dial talked about it on an Athletic article recently about how a lot of people are like, okay, he'll be a good president of hockey ops, provided that he's hiring the right kind of people and hiring a diverse diverse front office that looks at things beyond just the eye test and everything else, and leans into the analytics and department as well. And to his credit, Jim Rutherford mentioned the analytics department quite a bit and talked about like shoring it up and adding more pieces to it, which is great. And you should be, because the Canucks are a team that have been very behind on that over the last however many years.
He has a very interesting outlook on analytics. In 650, he said something to the effect of, analytics are really important to me, and I put a lot of weight into analytics, but I don't use them as like the sign off on decisions he makes. It's basically like a tool for him to, Yeah, I mean, it's fair. Like, you wouldn't be like, oh, so and so's expected goals for ratio is 60% and not 70. Therefore, I'm not going to trade for him, even though I have a good deal. It's just like a
Right.
reinforcing tool for him, I guess.
Right, which
But
is how you should use it, I would say, right? Like, it's a case of, like, using everything at your disposal, but at the end of the day, a human is still making the decision, therefore, it's gonna be kind of you'll still be the end all, if that makes sense? Like, maybe it's
yeah,
yeah,
it's completely fine. It's a completely fine outlook for a guy who, like, as if people don't know, Jim Rutherford is 72 years old. So to be citing analytics as a big factor in your decision making process or your player evaluation process, that's good. And especially
yeah,
from an elderly man. That's great. We love to hear progressive stuff
we
like that.
stand.
We stand Jim. I I did find it kind of concerning though in the 650 interview. He was like, they were asking him like, what is your perfect organizational structure? And he's like, well, I don't want to have too many people in management because then there's too many people in the kitchen offering opinions and they don't get heard. So I was in my head, I was kind of like, oh, that's probably music to Frankie's ears, who's trimmed his like head office staff to like 3 people,
Yeah,
two of them being brothers.
yeah, we haven't even mentioned Chris Gear and, who God, I'm blanking on, Jonathan
Off the
Wall,
wall, yeah.
got let go, this week as well before Jim Rutherford arrived, and I believe that wasn't Jim Rutherford's decision either, which just, makes things all the more interesting, especially when you've heard Francesco saying, "Oh, no, I don't make any decisions." Yeah,
Yeah.
uh, but
So
yeah, like,
here,
you're
let's quickly get into it because the timeline of events as presented to Canucks fans
that
was a bit baffling because the way things rolled out was we talked about this in our last episode about Jim Benning finally being gone, but they announced the collaborative effort by a bunch of high level executives, senior advisors who were going to come together and find a new interim GM or president of hockey operations. That was on Wednesday. The next day, Thursday, Tuesday they announce, or Monday they announce the collaborative. Tuesday, nothing happens. Wednesday, they announce Jim Rutherford is the GM or the interim GM and president of hockey ops. And then Thursday morning, they announce Chris Gear and Jonathan Wall have been fired. And today, we got a bit of clarity on that because a lot of people were rightly in the space of how is Jim Rutherford firing long-standing members of the Vancouver Canucks organization when he is not in town and couldn't have possibly done any interviewing process of who the people are that are in charge
right.
currently in management. Like, it seems very bizarre. And this came out on the heels of the owner, Francesco Aquilini, being like, yeah, I'm giving the new GM full autonomy. It'll be his team and whatever he wants to do, which was ironic because they had just hired Bruce Boudreau without an interim GM or president on board. So it was a bit kind of like, okay, who's really in charge here? And then today, on Monday morning, Jim Rutherford's first press conference, they asked Jim and Francesco, so why were Chris Gear and Jonathan Wall named as reasons to be hopeful for the future and then fired the next day? Like, this isn't the exact question, but phrasing basically. Like, why were these two named one day and then gone the next? And Jim Rutherford did the wonderful old man thing of being like, that wasn't my decision. I'll let Francesco answer that. Which is
Which
so
is
great.
good.
It
Which is
completely
good.
put him on the spot, and Francesco had to be like, well, we told Jim Rutherford that we needed a clean house, get a new culture going because the current culture didn't have a high enough bar for winning, basically.
Which,
And
to be fair, is totally correct.
which is completely correct, but it is very funny because, of course, this comes months after Francesco Aquilini
Just
defending that
fact.
said culture and the ownership or the management group that was in place like not even 2 months ago,
This
saying
is
the culture they've created is exactly what we want. So a
and this has
bit
got people. This is
funny.
why if you were one of the people, and again, I think our listeners are the best people in the world and are the smartest listeners in the world.
Yeah, that's fair.
If you're one of the people, This is why when an owner sends out a letter to season ticket holders and specifically doesn't mention things like the Stanley Cup, that matters.
Yes.
That in fact matters,
Phrasing
because that
matters.
it is because that's clearly what they were going for a long time was, oh, we're not going to try and build a cup contender. We're going to
We just
build
want
a
to get
team that
there.
that hopefully gets into the playoffs and then magic happens, kind of thing.
Yeah, this is like where I always come in on Twitter when I recap these press conferences, because I'm a stickler for the phrasing and the things said and not said. And this one was just so funny, his answer, where he's like, yeah, we wanted to clean house for Jim, so we decided to clean house by getting rid of Chris Gear and Jonathan Wall, and we did so with Jim Rutherford's approval. And Jim was just kind of like, I never met these guys, I never talked to them, I don't know, they said they wanted a culture change and I agree with that, and so they got rid of them and I'm fine with that. So Francesco tried the very like PC, like, oh, we had a process for why we got rid of these two guys, but really it was just like, I don't know. It's just the owner being like, I'm sick of losing. I'm sick of everyone in the management group. I'm getting rid of all of them, and I don't want to pay them anymore.
It very much screamed like I'm just like firing everybody for the sake of firing everybody a little bit. Like it was
A
one of
little
those,
bit, and
like,
a lot of the things were kind of like, we haven't even talked about this either, but Pierre LeBrun had an article too, where he had talked to Francesco outside of the Board of Governors meeting, and it was basically about like the hiring of Bruce Boudreau. And in that article, Francesco was basically like, yeah, we'd been talking with Jim Rutherford for like weeks in advance about like direction and what to do, and obviously like he wasn't going to wait for picking his own coach, so we got his blessing on Bruce Boudreau, and that was before he was technically hired.
and
So he was
Rutherford backed that
going,
up today.
yeah, and so he was basically admitting he was going around his current GM for the previous 3 weeks by getting advice from an outside person who was not an employee of the Vancouver Canucks at that time,
Not
which
only,
is a
not only
bit, I mean, I think that's almost like what our complaints were at the end of last year, or at any Jim Benning press conference when he was like, "Oh, I talk to Frankie every day," and we were like, "You talk to the ownership group every day. Like, you're the GM. Why is the ownership involved in this at all? That seems like a clusterfuck."
if he wants to check in once a week, has his weekly Zoom call or something, that's one thing. But every day
Yeah,
is
every day is a bit strange, and so
too much.
yeah, so for the past week, where we were kind of thinking, okay, the collective's put together, they're going to have an actual process to replace Jim with someone new. And then everything we've learned since that collective was put together almost feels like it was just PR. Like, we named the Sedins, Smeal, and all these guys as a committee to find a new GM and president of hockey ops, but the ink was already wet on the contract to sign Rutherford to be the next president of hockey operations directly by Frankie. So I would be very curious how Stan Smeal and the Sedins feel seeing someone like Chris Gear or Jonathan Wall posted up on this pedestal as like reasons to be hopeful for the future because they're part of the committee to improve the organization, only to be fired 24 hours later, while someone was hired after basically being in cahoots with the owner for the previous 3 weeks, unbeknownst to anybody. Like, that's a shitty way to treat people, first off.
Yeah, it's a very I don't know enough about running business, but like businesses or like a big company or something. But yeah, that seems shady.
But you don't even need to have run a business before. That's just
shady.
That's just not a way to treat people. It's like when you're selling stuff on Craigslist and like you get an email from some bum being like, "Can I buy this for $200?" And then you take his offer and you use it to up it with someone else by $50, and you screw that guy out of what he wanted.
You know what it is? It's you going to the owner's office or like the boss's office and then being like, "Don't worry, your job is very secure here. I think you'll be. I think I think you'll be dropping all concerns and then pressing a button, and of course the floor underneath you opens up and drops into a snake pit.
That's exactly what
It's
happened.
the Mr. Burns thing, essentially.
It's the
where
Mr.
like,
Burns
yeah.
thing, but you know the one where he presses the button and it drops, but the
The
person's not
door
standing on it,
opens
and he's
and
like, "Do
the
me a
painters
favor, could
move
you
your
take 2
desk,
steps to
sir.
the yeah, can
Yeah.
you do me a favor and move 2 steps to the left?" And he's like,
Yeah.
"Okay." And he does it again. That's kind of like what that is. It's like I'm sure the conversation would have had to have come up between Francesco and Jim, like, "Oh, by the way, I'm seeking outside counsel on how to replace you and improve this team you've fielded for me."
Yeah,
'Cause
and what's even weirder is that one of the things that Rutherford talked about today as well was about not only about that, it was also the fact that he literally was like he was feeling he said directly that he was like when we had talked about it, we were getting pretty close, but I was feeling a little under the weather at the time, like I was feeling a little sick. And I knew that they had like their own things to worry about and their own decisions to make. So I said no at the time. So originally Rutherford actually said no.
yeah,
But it
that's
was a
great.
thing where Aquilini was like, no, we'll wait to, and then also, but then okay, the Boudreaux decision ran the Boudreaux decision by Rutherford if it was someone he'd be working with, which again flies in the whole face of the idea that, oh, we're doing an exhaustive search to look through wire line, and it's like, oh, so actually you had already picked the guy. Not only had you already picked the guy for weeks, and you could have done this a lot earlier, you waited for him to be ready to accept
And
before
yeah.
and instead of, going to look at potential other, using that as an opportunity to go look at some other options first, which
Yeah,
is
I can't
again
remember.
like
I can't remember if I brought this up on the last episode we did together, but it was like Elliot Friedman made a comment on the Jeff Merrick show where he was like, "Oh, they haven't really interviewed anybody, but they're making calls to a lot of key people." And now in hindsight, a part of me is like, I don't think they interviewed a single person. Like someone said, call Jim Rutherford, and then Frankie did that, and he's been sticking with him for a month, getting his advice on how to go through with a management overhaul.
they called the idea of calling multiple people is just that one phone line was Jim Rutherford, the other one was Jimothy Rutherford or something.
Yeah,
It
it
was
was
something like that.
they
James
call
Rutherford.
they called 3 different people. They called Jim Rutherford at home, they called him on his cell, and they called him on Skype.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, that's
They
all it was.
interviewed multiple people.
Yeah, but besides that, there was the comment from Francesco Aquilini during Jim Rutherford's opening press conference. Shout out to Daniel Wagner for asking the
Okay.
uncomfortable questions because someone needed to ask it. But Daniel Wagner was basically asking for clarification on the Jake Vertanen investigation and asked Francesco very boldly and bravely if he would commit to publicizing the investigation results. And Francesco had a strange reaction because obviously Jim Rutherford's there. So like I kind of understand the first part where he was like, "Oh, publish the Pittsburgh results," and Daniel's like, no, the one in Vancouver." And then that's where things get very strange because
Okay, so I want to get because your opinion, your idea of what you heard on this code, I think you and I differ a little bit. So I want to hear what
okay.
you thought of this. So you thought this
So
is what you heard.
So this is how it actually translates, where Francesco says, "Which one? The one with Pittsburgh?" Daniel Wagner. Here in Vancouver. Francesco Aquilini then says, "Oh, you mean with the?" And then he furrows his brow and he leans towards Daniel. And he says, "The which? The Jake Vertanen?" And then Daniel Wagner says, "Yes." And then Francesco goes into his right. Okay, and then he explains, the investigations with the Vancouver Police Department, they haven't heard anything, yada, yada, yada. Bunch of non-answers, basically.
Yeah.
I kind of gave him shit on Twitter because the way that he phrased his response to Daniel intimated or implied that he wasn't sure which Vancouver investigation Daniel was asking about, which for most people in the Vancouver market, they only know about the Jake Vertanen investigation. As far as we know, that's the only open sexual assault investigation occurring with the Vancouver Canucks organization. But his phrasing by saying which and then confirming with the Jake Virtanen one implies that there's more going on. Granted, Francesco's been asked 3 times now about the Jake Virtanen investigation since the summer, and every single time he's had a weird non-answer where he appears to be aloof or unaware that this Jake Virtanen investigation exists or is real,
or it's a big
or
deal.
if it's a big deal, right? So a part of me is like, he's still trying to play aloof and fucked up on his phrasing, and in accidentally implied that his organization has 2 or multiple open sexual assault investigations with regards to the Vancouver Canucks, which is a pretty huge fuck up from the owner of a group that, just hired a GM who was also charged with covering up a sexual assault while as the GM of the Pittsburgh Penguins. So my whole issue was just like, if there really is just the Jake Virtanen pending investigation, you need to have a prepared statement at all times at these press conferences you attend where you don't come off like a fucking idiot or imply that your organization has multiple instances of sexual assault allegations towards the members of your team or your organization. That was my only issue with that entire press conference, because it was just like, you didn't need to make an uncomfortable question worse by not having a prepared or a canned answer. This is the one time where a canned answer is completely fine, because at least he would address it like professionally and appropriately, and he didn't, which is ridiculous because he was just asked about this last week. It's craziness to me.
It's a this is a case where, so I'll say this. I think I heard that, like, I interpreted that differently from you, in the sense of, I think I interpreted the way most people did, where it was I think what he was doing was the worst thing, which is that I think he was purposefully playing dumb on that question. Like, he was like, what case? Like, knowing full well.
I completely buy that he would be the type to try and play stupid and aloof and be like, "Oh, which investigation or what
Especially,
investigation?" But he said which instead
yeah,
because
like,
he was caught off guard, I guess.
because it was one of those things where, yeah, and then he starts by the Pittsburgh one. Like, come on, you like,
I
especially
know,
because
like,
people are like, well, they had just been talking about the Pittsburgh thing. It's like, well, actually, well, if you like, the full context of Daniel Wagner's question starts with talking about how there's the sexual assault allegation and the case going on in Vancouver, and tying that into how under Jim Rutherford's watch in Pittsburgh, a very similar situation. Well, a similar situation is the right way of putting it. Not with a player, but with a coach. Happened on their farm team in Wilkes-Barre. And to his credit, Rutherford, there was a little bit of a dodge on the, well, it's not I'm not in charge of Wilkes-Barre. So, which in most NHL cases is how it goes. Like, for the Canucks, it was a case for a long time where
they had
Jim
someone
Benning
else
was in
running the
charge
farm
of
team.
both.
Yeah.
Yeah, in most other markets,
every team has an AGM that is usually charged with
sole
taking
job
care
is
of the farm team, right? Like, that's
bingo.
completely normal. But
But it
you and
is
I are kind of
still
on the same page. It is it's a bit of a cop out for the head of the pyramid that is in charge with the entire organization's, like, the scope of the organization. It's a cop out to be like my hands are clean because I wasn't directly charged with running the team. It's like, you're
right.
still
He
the guy
attempted it,
where all information funnels up to you, right? So you
right.
can't he didn't need to say it, and I don't really know why, but a lot of these, like, confusions over his answers can kind of boil down to he's 72 years old and he's doing his best.
Yeah, and again, to his credit, I think he did a good enough job in saying that, like, we're not going to let that happen. I'm not going to let that stuff
Yeah.
happen again. And it's good that I'm that, like, to learn from those and everything, right? And that it seemed like he actually, like, he cared about not letting that be an issue, like being a regular problem with an organization, which is, again, good, considering the last general manager the Canucks had basically chalked it up to, like, a non-issue, right? Like, and was like, it's nothing. We don't know what's going on, and, like, very clearly. And then with Francesco, yeah, it was the case of, it seemed a lot like, again, Wagner's question started with the Vancouver situation in particular, and asking Rutherford about how they can draw off of how he can learn off that experience to help with what's gone on here.
Mhm.
And Francesco, for Francesco to be like, the Pittsburgh one, it's like, well, the question started with the Vancouver thing.
Yeah.
And that's why Rutherford was asked about it. And then for him to keep going and saying, oh, the Jake Virtanen thing, it's like, like who, again, like if you're like,
It was
I will say, I
needlessly
don't think that there is another sexual assault case. God forbid there is
yeah,
another one.
fingers
But
crossed, knock on wood, that
but
isn't the case.
that isn't the case, but like, come on, like, like
It
if the media is asking, they're asking about the one
they
with the hockey player that had been there for 7 years and kept getting chances long after he ran out of them, and it's and then the answer he came up with was, well, we're not going to talk about what's going on with the police. It's like, okay, sure, we're asking, what Wagner is asking is, will
yeah,
you make the results of your own
of
investigation
your
public?
personal investigation
The
into it
personal one
by
that
the
you did, not
organization.
the police investigation, yours. And he still was like, we're not going to talk about a police investigation. This is the third time that he's been asked about Jake Virtanen, and
Yeah, so
apparently every single time it's kind of come off in this, he's annoyed. It looks, or it appears, I should say, it appeared that he was annoyed that he was being asked about it, and it's like,
yeah,
you're in charge of
yeah,
you're
it's
the
your
owner.
team.
You're the owner. Like,
Have a prepared response about it, or actually like the
at the
really
very least,
scary thing is like in theory they could have done zero investigation, and
that's what.
the answer that Daniel's question would actually invoke is him being like, oh, we just assisted the VPD with their investigation, we conducted none, we bought him out, and that's all we did, which
Yeah, by buying him
is
out, we are
possible they
cleared
could
of
have
all
done.
guilt, kind of thing,
Yeah, exactly.
essentially.
Like
We
it's
are
out of our
absolved of
hands.
anything.
We got rid of him. What more do you want? Which is
Yeah,
like
which
it
is
could be what
incorrect.
he's trying to
Yeah,
avoid like the
because
negative publicity that would come from it.
yeah, and like you said about, like, having a prepared response, like, even, like, again, low bar to clear is just say, you don't even have to really talk about that case per se. Just say, you know what, like, we're working, we're putting together a plan right now to ensure that we are,
Mhm.
that if this were to come up again, we're far more prepared for it, and we're
Yeah.
far more prepared with an actual, like, plan of how to deal with it and how to respond to it, kind of thing,
Mhm.
and
And
to make the workplace and to make it safer for everybody, right?
yeah,
So,
and that's not asking a lot either. Like
no,
I I think I spent like a good portion of like the first few episodes commending Francesco Aquilini and the Canucks organization for what they were doing with regards to
yeah.
indigenous relations and like the land agreements and the land acknowledgments like in pregame ceremonies at the Abbotsford Arena and at the Canucks Arena. Like I think they are very progressive when it comes to issues that they really take seriously and want to be ahead of.
And
This one,
even with the Virtanen one, they didn't wait for, say, pressure from the fan base or the media to cut him. They basically
well,
booted him off the team the second they found out about the allegations, or like the
once the
allegations
news
went public,
broke that the allegations were coming out, then
right?
they didn't like do like the, oh, we're gonna investigate and then decide what to do with him. They were just
Right.
like, he's suspended,
They very
then his season
easily
was
could have
done.
been like, we're playing hockey, he's gonna keep playing hockey. They very easily could have
Yeah.
done that, and a lot of NHL teams have tried to do stuff like that and tried to pull that one over. And at the beginning of it, yeah, it seemed like they took it pretty seriously, where they're like, okay, he's done. We're not gonna play him again for the rest of the year. Like, this is going on. We're not gonna have it. And they seemed like they started off with the right intentions, right?
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, at the very least, all they got to do is just have like you were saying, just a little statement there that just says we are aware of the ongoing investigation. We've done our part by handing it off to the VPD. When our internal investigation is done, we will have more for you at that time. That's all you got to say. You don't have to come off like you're a dick or you're trying to like invalidate Daniel's question or make him feel like he's like
It was a
uncomfortable for
great
even having
question.
to ask it. It's a great question. And I think the frustrating thing too is like he asked it in a way where like he completely gave Francesco and Jim Rutherford like an escape to look like, heroes by being like, yeah, we're
It's a
definitely going
softball
to.
question, really.
It's a complete softball because he's like, would you pledge to release the findings of your investigation? And all you have to be is like, Yeah, I think that would be smart for the betterment of our society if we let the world know what our investigation discovered in regards to the allegations of sexual assault and what we had to do to prove or disprove what exactly happened in, the summer of 2014 or whenever the fuck it was, right? Complete softball. They blew it, but I don't want that to color everyone's perception of what happened in that press conference because that wasn't the only thing that happened. I did think Jim Rutherford came off very well. He came off like a guy who wasn't trying to sell magic beans. He came in and he immediately told the fan base, like, yeah, there are flaws with this roster. They are not fast enough. Their schedule is about to get infinitely worse. So while it's great to see exciting hockey over the past 4 games, we will know, or I will know personally, that what this team is all about towards the end of January when their schedule is brutal. And for people like you and I who have heard Jim Benning in every single press conference say, "Oh, well, hopefully the players take a step and it's on them to make themselves a playoff contender."
Yep.
It's a relief to hear an executive acknowledge the flaws, the hard work that's ahead, and say that what the current status quo isn't good enough. And the current limitations of the team mean that fixes aren't going to come cheap, quick, or easy. And it's a tough pill to swallow for people who've spent the last 8 years waiting for better
Change.
results or
Yeah.
change that actually commits to a vision or a plan.
Yeah.
But I
And
thought I thought Jim did a good job aside from, one blunder in a question and his owner boss next to him fumbling the bag on one of the other ones.
overall, like the questions that he was asked by the media, like overall, like it was still a case of he still believe like he knows what he wants and what he wants to see from a team, but he was very open and clear with what that involves,
Yeah.
and talking about things where it's like, we're in no situation to be trading important futures uh for help now, kind of thing, which like, especially considering we're barely a few months off from Jim Benning literally trading a ninth overall pick for Oliver Ekman-Larsson and Connor Garland. As
Yeah.
much as Connor Garland has worked out very well, and has paid off quite well,
Mhm.
for that ninth overall pick, for where the Canucks are at right now and where they're standing, would have really come in handy.
Yeah.
And I appreciate hearing that kind of stuff. I hear it like Taj 1944 having like a thread of like a bunch of the stuff that he said on 650. Among
Mhm.
some of the quotes, there was Rutherford saying, like you mentioned the I don't want it too big thing, but he also
Mhm.
mentions, like, he likes debates between the analytics people and the eye test people. He wants to sit back and listen to both sides. He also talks about how in meetings there's going to be debates. Everyone gets to say what they want to say, and that the Stan Smeal and the Sedins are going to play important roles as part of that, which is good. Like
I
that's the kind of stuff that has been missing from the Canucks for a long time.
I will say it was really funny because I was listening to the 650 interview and he's like talking about like his management staff and like how he would have the organizational chart set up, and he's like, you know, Stan Smeal and the Sedins are going to have a really important role for me in this organization. And his phone immediately cut out, like the call dropped, and I was like, oh, Frankie didn't like him talking about Stan Smeal or the Sedins. He didn't like
Yeah,
that one bit.
he's immediately cut the new Canadian phone. He's given him like or something. Yeah.
Statement
Um
comes out: Jim Rutherford has been relieved of his duties as
yeah.
interim GM.
No. Oh man. But overall, yeah, like there are things where he talks about situations and how he's not going to rush into anything. But again, this is why
Yeah.
it's important that they made this change now rather than later, because again, like we mentioned before, that the trade deadline
Mhm.
there's going to be, you still have a trade deadline coming up in between, say, the draft and the off season, where the UFA signings start to go and everything like that. The Having that extra amount of time to figure out what your team is and start making those fixes sooner rather than later can
Yeah.
sometimes, if you do things correctly, can shave off a year, like a season off of your, like, your time, like of how much
Absolutely,
time
yeah.
you have to rebuild, because you're being proactive about it. And you're
Mhm.
not having to wait that whole full summer to be like, well, now we've made these decisions. Let's see how they do on the ice, kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Now you have that benefit of, okay, we're gonna get about what between now and I think the trade deadline's in late March. You're gonna get at least
Yeah.
like 40 more games probably before you
Mhm.
or I guess they're at game 29
They
now.
ha
So I guess like 50, like 30 more games about around there, kind
Yeah,
of.
it's like they have the Olympic break, then they come back for like a week and a half or something, then the trade deadline happens. So they have like a bit of buffer to figure out what the rest of or what they want to do, I guess, heading into
Yeah.
the trade deadline, which is good. That's why I loved when he was like at the end of January, we'll know what we have in our team, because to your point, like if at the end of January Jim Rutherford's like, "Oh, this is actually going to take a lot more work than we anticipated," it might be in our best interest to sell high on a bunch of guys right now and try and insulate and refresh for next year, because
Yeah.
next year, if we hang on to them, their value might be lower than it is right now. Like, because we don't really know what's going to happen with the Olympic break, but right now it kind of seems like a lot of Vancouver Canucks American players are going to go to the Olympics on Team USA.
Right. Which
And
is going
if
to be an
they
international stage.
Yeah, when international stage, you're gonna have a lot of attention there. So, say JT Miller goes and he has like an incredible performance, you might be able to sell incredibly high because his contract is up at the end of next year.
Yeah. JT Miller, I think, is the prime candidate right now in terms of like
Mhm.
if the Canucks look at the team and go, yeah, this is going to take some work. We better get a jump start now while we know, while we have the extra time to do so. JT Miller is one of those guys that you look at as, oh, he's going to fetch he could fetch a pretty huge return right now.
Mhm.
And that's something worth capitalizing on if you can get it. And yeah, like you mentioned the Olympics in there, like that idea of like, yeah, there are gonna be some guys, obviously some guys that go to the Olympics, probably most of them that would end up going are going to be guys who are part of your core for a while to come, guys like
Yeah,
Pedersen, Besser,
Hughes.
Demko probably being the biggest one of all. That was the other thing Rutherford mentioned. Really highlighted how
Yeah,
important Thatcher Demko is for
yeah. He
this
wa
team long term, which is, yeah, great.
he wasn't sure about their competitive window, but he was certain they do have an all-star goalie. So that's
Yeah.
the one thing he knows. So you can feel a little safe there, Lachlan, that your boy Thatcher Demko isn't going anywhere, because the
God,
franchise, I
thank
think he actually
God.
used the phrase franchise goalie
He
multiple
did.
times,
He did.
which is high praise, because it's not like an all-star, because you can say that, like you could say that about Tucker Pullman if you really wanted to. Like if you're Jim Benning, you're like, I got an all-star right shot
You
defenseman,
can't
right?
say Tucker Pullman is a franchise
You
defenseman,
can't say
right?
he's a franchise defenseman. Like if you're saying Thatcher Demko's your franchise goalie, like there's a lot of goalies in the NHL right now you wouldn't even consider franchise goalies for teams they've been with for a few years. Dresden
Yeah.
Jarry's not a franchise goalie. You know what I mean?
He's a good goalie, but he is not, yeah,
Yeah.
you're not
Robin
building
Lehner's
a
not a
team around.
franchise goalie. Like,
Yeah, he's yeah, another case. Yeah, a lot of case. There are lots of goaltenders who are very, very good, but they're not necessarily. Oh, we are so sure that you are going to be great for us that we're going to build the team around you. The Canucks have been pretty fortunate that they've kind of run into a kind of a just long run since Roberto Luongo joined, that they've almost always had a franchise goaltender, more
yeah.
or less. Like even like even the say the weaker links, like say like an Eddie Lack or a Ryan Miller, were
We're still
still
pretty good.
really, really, really good for what they were
You have
bringing to
to
your team.
you have to go to
Yeah,
the Burke years and the Nonis, like the early part of the
Dan
Nonis years when their
Cloutier.
backup was like really not great.
Oh, I
Um,
remember that. Oh, that first year out of the lockout, Dan Cloutier getting hurt. Alex Auld, for his credit, like God,
mhm.
Alex. That's the other thing is Alex Auld brought up his stock enough that Dave Notice could trade him for Roberto Luongo, which is
Yeah,
incredible.
which is
Um, yeah,
unbelievable.
thank you. Who is the Panthers GM? Oh yeah, Mike Keenan. How did that go? The Mike Keenan, secret hero of Canucks lore. Um, but yeah, like there was that 06 year they had obviously when Cloutier went down, then they had I want to say there was Maxime Ouellette for like one game, there was Mika Norinen for like two. Oh god, there it was a real who's who of just like
The
guys you'd never remember, except, and I was the only person who remembered because I just loved goaltenders at
Yeah,
the
because like
time and I was like 9.
I didn't really follow like the Canucks during that time. I just knew about like the pain that my friends went through at that time, and it would always be just like them lamenting how shit X backup goalie was for the team. We had
Yeah.
we actually had like a teacher who was like a total beer league player in like grade 7 or something, and he'd always come back from like games like the next night clearly hungover as shit, and he like everyone would just grill him because the team's goaltending was so shit, and so he was like up late for basically nothing. And yeah, that show's pretty funny. Like especially
Yeah.
as like an outsider who was like, yeah, I think this year I'm gonna cheer for the Hurricanes. Like fuck it, why not? And then the year before being like, yeah, sure, why not? The Sabres or the Devils or whoever, like whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. You're
I was the rogue,
the
the
mercenary. You're the
mercenary, just like whoever I had
the
a feeling was gonna win the cup. That's who I chose, and it actually
and then
worked.
yes. Yeah. And I
4
was gonna say
years in a row, I picked the cup winner.
then you stupidly, foolishly hooked your anchor to the Canucks
I did.
forever, and you're screwed now.
I did. I
Uh,
screwed myself. Okay, let's
but
get
people think they're
into
good. Yeah.
yeah. They finally sorted that out. Thank God. Let's get into the Francesco tweet. Let's
Oh
pivot
yeah.
to the funny tweet. His tweet where he went after the media, which I got to pull it up still. But
Oh yeah, that was another thing that nobody asked him about that question, and I think like I know a lot of people were like, why didn't they ask about the tweet? It's like
of
because
course
what
they
are you
can't
gonna
ask him
do?
about it. Like it's so
Like what are you gonna
embarrassing. Like these people are trying to like as dumb as this sounds. Like they're trying to make a first impression on the new GM who they're going to be building a relationship with over the next, God knows, like maybe another 8 years
another
for all
8
they
years?
know.
Yeah, exactly. It
He would
could
be
be another 8 years,
he would
right?
be 80, but you never know.
You never know.
But
And
let me read
also
this.
at the end of the day, knowing what Francesco like, especially when you consider the like you talk about like the Vertanen thing as well. Like it's basically a throwaway question. Like you're not going to get a real answer out of him for it. So like it's one of those like there's no point in asking. It's one of those we're trying to figure out what's wrong with the hockey team. We don't care what the owner's real like actual like beef with the media is. Like it's not
Yeah.
that important at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly.
Here it
Okay.
is though.
Here's the tweet.
Oh
It's
boy.
very funny because you just have to remember this guy is in charge of like $1 billion organization, and
And
it's
likes to
pretty funny.
likes to put himself in charge.
Yes, he does. So the quote: "Gotta love media in Vancouver. 2 weeks ago, what's wrong with Aquilini? Why isn't he cleaning house? Can't he see it's a disaster? Why is he so slow to act? 2 weeks later, why is he moving so fast? Why is he cleaning house? Can't he see it's a bad look? Kind of funny, actually." So that's amazing.
It,
It's like so funny that this came from like I tweeted at him like I refuse to believe this is a real tweet from the owner of a sports franchise because it's just like I like you I'm sure we're like this is fake. This is a
I
hack.
thought it was
Mr.
I
Boost,
thought it was Booth
right?
for sure. I
Yeah, it was so
100% was like,
ridiculous that
okay,
he's
Booth,
taking a
that's
shot at the
okay, Booth,
media.
sure. And then I'm like, oh wait, nope, there's an actual blue check mark there. That's the real Francesco
Yeah,
Aquilini
just
doing a victory lap after 3 games. At that point, it was 3 wins, I think.
and it
If
wasn't
yeah,
even really about the wins either. It was like a
no,
tweet. It was like basically a tweet criticizing IMAX article where he was like, it seemed a bit brash to fire Chris Gear and Jonathan Wall after preaching patience and a thorough investigate or not investigation
that was the interesting thing.
process or whatever, right?
It,
And he
it
very
very
stuff
pointed.
from
Yeah.
IMAX thing, calling it a bad look, which is
Could have been
exactly how IMAX.
coincidence, but like the odds on that happening are
The odds are very slim. It was
very
quite
slim.
clearly someone sent him IMAX article, and he got really upset that his number one guy, his then number one ally in the media, was taking a shot at his process by rushing to hire Jim Rutherford and Bruce Boudreau without a POHO in place,
And then firing a bunch of people.
and then firing a bunch of people just
Yeah.
willy nilly. Which
It's almost
totally
like it's almost like not acting on Jim Benning's future quickly enough and moving slowly to replace him are two completely different things that don't really have
Mhm.
are in reality complete not related are not related things. Like you
Yeah,
can
weird.
like again, literally what were people asking for? Get rid of Benning now and then take your time on the replacements. That's what people were saying. So you go ahead and drag the first part out for as long as possible, and then within a week you've got a new president of hockey ops, a new coach, you've got everybody. It's like you didn't have to do both. You could have like taken your time on the second part. Like there's no rush for that one. And
it
Dan
was
Smeal
clearly
going
just
down with the winningest GM in Canucks history with a winning percentage of 1,000 on 2 games.
good for him.
Yeah, good for Stan. Good for Stan. We love Stan. We stand Stan.
We do stand Stan.
We stand Smeal.
We stand Smeal. That's what I tweeted. Yeah. The worst thing that came out of this tweet, as funny as it was the burner counts and the Aquiluni like stands coming out of the woodwork to be like, take that media, you negative fucks. I don't know how many people I had in my mentions for simply replying to Frankie's tweets being like, I can't believe this is real. Like it's in my head, like that tweet sums it up. Like it's just so funny. I had so many people in my replies being like, take that, you fucking loser, you piece of shit, negative fuck. And first off, thank you for considering me media to the point of like being lumped in the category. Which
I saw at least one tweet where you got lumped in as the negative media with with Drancer and Daniel. So you got lumped in with Pasatoboulos and Drance.
Two dudes who've been doing this for years, and there's like me, guy doing this
just a guy.
Time. Just a dude
noted
recapping AHL hockey in his spare time who
should have
is fortunate enough to go to games live to get quotes and whatever. Like, yeah, sure, that does qualify me as accredited media, but it's very funny to be like two dudes at the top of their game, 30K plus followers talking about the Vancouver Canucks.
Two of the best media people in hockey, basically.
And it's just me who memes 99% of the time and then puts out game recaps that barely any of my followers read. Like,
why don't we have a t-shirt?
So funny.
Why don't we have a t-shirt yet that just has your face on it and says just a guy, like just a dude, like, and then like quads and quotes or something. I could that's coming soon. That's new for the holiday season.
The shirt, or if anything, would have like a fake, like the bandana thing around it, or like a fake press lanyard. Pass. And the press pass would be my face, like a drawing of my face, and underneath, instead of my name, it says just a dude.
I can't tell you how much I love that, and we're totally doing that now.
So put that in your Christmas wish list there, kids, because
I'm writing that down right now.
Yeah. But anyways, that was just something we had to highlight because it was really funny. Because of course you had all the freaks come out of the woodwork, and when all the freaks come out, usually you get like some really funny, like
it was
tete-a-tete and repartee with the weirdos by saying like, go fuck yourself.
Yeah.
Shut the fuck up. Don't talk to me.
Don't you know we have 21,000 plays on TikTok? How dare you?
Dude, you're TikTok famous. We're relatively TikTok famous. Give us a break.
I mean, literally there have been more plays. Again, it's a bit of a skewed logic considering it's like a 6-second clip versus a full game. But like we have had more people watch watch that video than can fit in Rogers Arena for a game, which is just wild. Which makes no sense to me. It's at 23,000 now. It is, but in all seriousness, it is one of those things where it's like it's kind of, in a way, it's almost in that same vein of like the "I won by a lot" tweet kind of thing. Like it's one of those, it's one of those where it's like okay, if you truly believe you don't have to prove it to us. You don't have to don't have to justify it to us. If you made the right decisions for what you believe, then good for you, man. Like, what you do? Yeah, we're obviously at the end of the day, we're not billionaires who can own an NHL franchise. So if you believe that that's what you can do, if you're making the right decisions, you don't need to come out on Twitter and publicly and justify those to us. Like in a press conference sense, we're going to ask you about it, but like.
It is genuinely funny that the guy who was on radio like 2 months ago being like, don't insult Jim. If you have a problem with how the team's built, you can diss me. Immediately running to Twitter to complain about the people dissing him.
Yeah, there
like
you go.
He couldn't hack it after like 3 days of people being like, why does the process make no sense? Like that's fucking comedy gold as far as I'm concerned. Anyways, let's move on quickly here to some NHL stuff, shall we?
Yeah.
Let's
You
talk
want to talk
about.
about the goal song?
Oh yeah, I didn't actually hear it on the broadcast because I've been watching it like muted while I track AHL Abbotsford games. But I've
You've been
heard that
doing a
apparently they
great
changed
job
it.
at, by the way. You've been doing a
Oh,
great
thank
job.
you.
Yeah, they changed it. So for 80s night, there was 80s night the 2 games ago against Winnipeg.
Mhm.
And for that night, they changed the goal song from what had been Van Halen's Ain't Talking About Love for the last 3 seasons.
It's a terrible goal song. It
It's
sucks.
not great. It's not great. At to Don't You Forget About Me by Simple Minds, which you might remember is the song from The Breakfast Club. It was there for the first game, and then they brought it back last night. And I'm gonna say this, like, okay, I saw somebody, so I'm already hesitant to say anything because I saw somebody tweeting like, "Oh, I'm sure the negative media is gonna complain about the goal song change," and I'm like, God damn it! Like I can't say anything now, like because I was like,
Oh, that's what I forgot to acknowledge with my neutral Cody account.
yeah, oh, that was
Damn
so
it.
funny. So, and if anyone wasn't following on Twitter, you did. So Jackson McDonald from Rock
He
City
did
Fever,
something
he did
pretty
it
much the exact same, but it was more like I don't know if it was
because
neutral. It was like I'm just a generic hockey
generic
man.
Vancouver sports guy, and
Yeah.
I loved that, and I tweeted at him. I'm like, your ideas are intriguing to me, and I'd like to subscribe to your newsletter, to your
Yeah.
Substack or something.
Yeah.
And it was funny. And
Your
then you did
Jack
a similar
stack.
bit. You did a neutral bit because again, everyone's like, oh, media, you have to be
Yeah.
extremely
You
neutral,
have too
no
many
opinion.
you have too many narratives with like I see that a lot is like you could tweet something very generic just like I don't really like the goal song and then someone will reply and be like this is just a tweet to support your negative narrative. It's like
Yeah.
it's just a tweet, man. Like
Yeah, it's
calm
like
the fuck
yeah,
down.
but I loved your neutral bit and how many
Yeah.
people were like, loved it. Like, I think a lot of people really liked it, and, for me, what it reminded me of is the
The
neutrals from
neutrals from
Futurama.
Futurama. That's what I
It
was trying to channel was the monotonous in the tweet like voice. So like if you read it, you could only read it in that it is in the
uh,
fact the second intermission. Like there's
yeah,
just there's no inflection.
like,
It's just
in one
completely
of those
bone
AI
dry.
voices, yeah, like, when one of those, like,
Yeah.
AI like, those AI voices.
Yeah, like if
Yeah.
Siri read like if Siri was a tweeter for Canucks Twitter, that's what it would be. Like the inflection is all wrong. So it's like a goal was scored and then
Oh,
that's
maybe
it.
that's oh, yeah, exactly, and yeah, for me, it reminded me yeah, the neutrals I on Futurama, I've often said are, like, my favorite, arguably the best one-off episode characters of TV history, where they're
Mhm.
just like, "Your neutralness, what do you think about this? I have no strong feelings one way or the other." Applause, like,
Yeah.
"If I don't make it, tell my wife hello."
Hello.
All I know is my gut says maybe.
Yeah.
Like, and that I think is so good. And that was how I was reading all of your tweets last night. It's the
Wonderful.
intermission. Oh, there's a yeah, they have shots on goal. Like that.
Yeah,
Oh,
it was definitely like a bit of the because you can only be so neutral when like talking about hockey plays and like watching it on
right.
mute. It was hard to like keep up.
Yeah.
But like so it eventually kind of became like a neutral generic hockey man take. So it's like well, I can't remember what it was. Like just a reminder after the second period or after
There's
this
a
period
third period.
after this period there will not be a third or there will not be another intermission. The game will be over. Period. Like,
No, it's
that's
too
it?
good. Too good.
Yeah. Anyway,
It was very
I
funny,
might keep
but
that up for the next game too, like, I might just switch back to
maybe
generic or,
you might just have to
neutral man.
make that an account that you run, like a
I
second account
might.
that you run, where but, like,
I
not a
have enough
burner,
accounts as
like, people will
is.
know it's you, but it'll
Yeah,
be like but it would be like yeah, but it's like one of those things where it's like you're just doing it for the bit, for the lulz.
yeah,
But from the goal song thing, I was, like, listening to it, and I was like, "80s night, good song." On a 40 games a year, I'm not a fan, and I know a lot of other people are,
yeah,
and I'm like, I'm sorry. Here's the thing. The way I look at goal songs is that it's either got to be like there are two things. It's either got to be intimidating, or it's got to be like annoying. It's got to be a little bit of in
yeah.
that
The best of
spectrum
both worlds, like Hannah Montana.
because yeah, exactly. It's like thank you, fellow Gen Zer Cody. It is because it's one of those things is that the goal song is just as much not for the opponents as it is for the fans, the home fans, right? Like it's one of those things where like people remember Chelsea Dagger in Vancouver forever because of how much it pissed them off to hear it 1,000 times, right? So that's why that goal song is really good for Chicago. And I would say the same thing for like Kerncraft 400 for Boston or something, right? It's on the annoying side. And then you've got like the intimidating ones, like Lithium by Nirvana, which is what the Kraken are using now, is really good.
Yeah, it's a good one.
And what I would say, say like Holiday was for the Canucks for a very long time. I think that Don't You is too cute. I think it's too cute for a goal song. It's not enough, and it's not annoying enough. Like say another like the other 80s song that I think they tried to channel here was how the Leafs use Hall and Oates, or they use the what is it the
You Make My Dreams Come True or whatever. Yeah.
Exactly. That song has it's a bit cutesy, but it's got a little bit of the annoying.
It's got some pump to it.
Yes.
Don't You is very airy and ethereal, which doesn't work. You have to have some pump to it, some thump.
It needs some hard. It needs a bit more guitar. Essentially, it needs a little bit more guitar and a little bit more drums. Is kind of the thing here, right?
Yeah.
And I think
it's a bit too flat.
Which is why, again, like the song that I pushed last week was "Raise a Little Hell" by Trooper, which is a Vancouver band, and it's also like it hits hard when you hear it, right? And it's one of those good. It's a perfect song for that kind of thing. I think this one's a little cutesy. That's just my opinion, though. Like, if everyone else likes it, I get that it's definitely improvement on the last one, but it's still like I think it's still a work in progress. I wouldn't marry this one, essentially, you know.
Kind of like a lot of the Canucks things, right? The bar is so low that it doesn't really matter what you go with, but it does take a bit of thought and ingenuity to at least raise the bar. Don't You Forget About Me does not raise the bar. It's just sidestepping a bit more.
Yeah, just
so it doesn't do anything for me.
Okay, yeah.
As for the NHL stuff, we need to quickly talk about Connor Bedard, 16-year-old, getting picked to Team Canada for the World Juniors. Shout out to Connor Bedard. That rocks. Yeah. We love to see generational talents. It should make the Canucks first overall pick a little spicy in the next couple of years.
Yeah,
okay.
we have
hopefully they're not.
Yeah, we haven't talked. I'm excited to get to talk about to do a podcast during. I think you and I started doing the podcast together literally at the tail end of the World Juniors last year, so we didn't really talk about it much because we were very focused on the Canucks getting back into play at that point, especially with how quick the season was rolling through. I'm interested. I'm excited that we're gonna get to do like some stuff talking about the World Juniors this time around.
I'm excited because my work. I mean, it's not a great thing because it's for bad reasons, but my work is shutting down for the final week and a bit of December, just because like the timing just doesn't really work and they can't really afford to keep open. So that means for basically the World Juniors, like at least I'll be able to wake up in the mornings and watch some U20 hockey, which is always fun. It makes me think of Christmas when I'm watching the World Juniors, so I'm a fan.
Yeah, me too. I'm excited to get to watch the World Juniors again, especially like Canada's coming off. I always think it's better to watch the World Juniors when Canada's not coming off a gold medal. Like I think it's always particularly
adds a little spice to it.
It adds a little spice, and I think I think a lot of Canadians, particularly in the last half decade or so, have kind of gotten to this point with the World Juniors where it's one of those rare times where we're like, it's okay that our home country doesn't win all the time. It's good to see other countries jump in and win things, because you want to see hockey grow and that it's improving in other places, and that you're not the only power for hockey power forever.
Speaking of Jackson McDonald, he has that point too on Roxy Favor where he's basically like, most people now tune into the Olympics or the World Juniors to root against Canada because they're so used to seeing them win that you're basically watching to see who can like unthrone them or unseat them from the throne. Like that's kind of what you're tuning in for nowadays, which it's a bit true. Like you kind of going in and then you see Latvia have one good game and you're like, yeah, they can do it. Let's fucking go.
Yeah, most people tune in now just to watch their team. Like it's that, or like just to watch their own team prospects. Like I think, like for example, normally Canadians we're not cheering for Russia that much, but like Vasily Podkolzin was on the team last year, so everybody was was heavily invested in seeing the Russians do well. Nils Höglander was playing for Sweden, so people were very heavily invested in that too. So it's good to see that they're getting that, and so you want to see those teams succeed, even if that sometimes comes at the cost of Canada, especially. And in Canada's case, of course, it's one of those things where it's like, we have the Olympics. If we really want to get like, oh, this is our game, we're going to win and we're going to cheer hard for Canada, it's at the Olympics. At the junior tournaments, you just want to see kids improving and getting better, and like seeing other countries,
stuff, basically.
Like God, wouldn't like how great would it be if Germany came out of nowhere to be a really good hockey, like really good hockey country, or like Latvia or Austria, but all of which have sent like some pretty good players before to World Juniors, but have never been like good enough to win anything. Like, how great would it be if they could like sustainably do that on a regular basis, right? Like, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, that's what we love to see mostly.
Yeah.
Okay, outside of the World Junior stuff, we got to talk about John Tortorella, who was in the news for cheating on Trevor Zegras' really fun goal that he scored, or that he assisted on. I have a soft spot for John Tortorella because I think he's great. He's great. Listen, he has some great opinions on a lot of issues in hockey as it stands. So I can forgive him for having an old man take every once in a while, especially one as dumb as this. It's a stupid take. It's a fun goal. Just let players have fun and do cool ass shit that results in goals.
Yeah, see, this is the one where, like, I'm kind of in the same boat as you, but for me, this was the quote where I'm like, this is a dumb old man who's there's a reason why you're not a coach. You're not a coach anymore. Because I'm like, he's like talking like, this was the thing, right? So basically, like, I'm gonna give the cliff notes of the quote here, or I think there's a there, because if I can find the paraphrased quote, he does give credit to Sonny Milano and Trevor Zegras for setting up this great Michigan goal, right? Like this Michigan style goal. But he talks about it. He's like, is it good for the game? That's a skilled play. I hear Ray, Ray referring to Ray Ferraro, like all the kids and stuff are doing that now in practice and stuff. I'm not so sure. Then he says, I'm just not so sure it's great for the game. If you did that back in the 2000s, late 90s, you would get your head taken off. It's cool. It's cool to watch and all that, but I'm not so sure it's good for the game. And then I stand by that. And then he was asked by Arda Okal. This is from Yahoo Sports, by the way. This is from their article about it. Tortorella was then asked by host Arda Okal what his reaction would be if a player scored that type of goal in a team he was coaching. I'd have a talk with the people. I would after the game. I'm not trying to be difficult about it. It's fun to watch. It's really cool, but I just think our game has gone so far away from what the game should be, a hard game, an honest game. It's almost gotten too showman. This is the part, and this is where you see, like, he talks about where he loses the plot entirely for me, where it's like, and where I think a lot of people have lost the plot in terms of what hockey should be.
Yeah.
In terms of like this idea, I've seen some people talking about, like, of course that makes sense because, it's less people are going to watch if it's not as hard hitting. It's like, what are you talking about? Why is this? If that's the selling point of the sport, if the selling point of the sport is the part where people aren't scoring goals, then there's something wrong with your sport, or if you're somebody who stands by that being the cool part, you clearly didn't like hockey that much to begin with. You just liked the rough and tumble, at which point go watch the UFC or football. Yeah. There are lots of other sports that have that kind of element built into the cake, that where it works properly. Yeah. But it does, and you can go watch that instead. Like, and then there's the R game part specifically was where it really came in. It came a little bit of like that gatekeeping, essentially, where it's like,
definitely,
where it's like, okay, why is it a problem that people want to see the sport get grow to interest a larger audience, especially considering he's saying this on ESPN, who literally just paid through like a bunch of money for the right to bring those numbers up for the next however many years in the United States, where it's most
it's not really a good look to be like criticizing the game they just spent millions to get the rights of, and be like, it shouldn't be fun or exciting. It should be boring.
It should be a huge boring slog. And to be fair to John Tortorella, that makes sense. That's the only time he won a Stanley Cup, so that's where his success came from, was winning in those terrible boring hockey years. But no, I love the fact that, like, I think the best example I can give is that so in the game against the Jets that went to a shootout, Elias Pettersson got the first shootout attempt and he pulled off the Forsberg, which is a gorgeous goal. Chef's kiss, gorgeous goal. He pulls that off. And I remember thinking to myself at the time, like, the fact, if this were the late 2000, like the 2000s or the late 90s, and he put that goal in, that goal would be on every like plays of the year, like every play of the week or whatever, like highlight pack for the rest of, for like multiple years. Like it would be on that highlight reel. We have come so far as a sport now where that goal isn't even the best goal of that week. Like it's not, or even
or that game
of that game per se. Yeah, that's great. Like that's the kind of, like, I love that goals like Pettersson's are not necessarily such a rarity that they just everybody freaks out for a month about it, right? Like I love that we've come far enough in this sport that there's variety, that there's variety, and that it happens on a regular enough basis that it's bringing more eyes to a sport, especially with, say, like a team like Anaheim, which I normally wouldn't classify as a very exciting team on the,
even though they're winning the division somehow.
They're winning the division, yeah, but like, and that a lot of that's kind of due to playing a little bit more of that defensively structured hockey, a little bit more of that kind of thing, and then having guys like Trevor Zegras and Sonny Milano and Jamie Drysdale and Max Comtois stepping up at the right times, kind of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's such a great thing for the sport, especially when you're trying to appeal to a larger audience, in particularly people coming from sports like basketball, where, you know, points are racked up to 100, so it looks there's a lot more scoring in that, or like baseball or something. Oh man,
F1,
F1.
F1, especially because F1 is such a broad audience that like appeals to everyone, because they don't like try and curb or tell you what you should be appreciating in the sport. Like they don't have panelists being like, you should appreciate this person's driver or driving style or this car, and you're stupid for
there's only
appreciating someone exciting, right?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Yeah, there's only one way to score a goal is not the way that's going to push hockey forward. And I'm sure ESPN probably had something to say about it too, when they, like you said, spent hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars for the rights to broadcast the game, to have one of their panelists basically being like, you're ruining the sport by supporting cool shit like this. Like, it's not a great look, really.
You literally had you're literally, the rights got bought by two channels and like platforms that have used their marketing skills to really get people back into the NBA and get people into the NBA, and not the like the hard foul. They're not cheering the hard fouls in those highlights or anything. It's the dunks. It's the three
fun
pointers
stuff.
It's Steph Curry taking a crazy nice 3-pointer from like the half court. Like those are the kinds of things that get people to watch those kinds of sports. People watch the MLB for dingers. They watch them for that kind of stuff. Oh god, we didn't even talk about this. Like there was the whole thing expose where it came out earlier this week that the MLB had been juicing some baseballs.
Maybe that was
nuts.
Maybe that's what the NHL needs to do. They need to juice the pucks. Home games for the Vancouver Canucks use a lighter puck so that they get fucking hammered on one-timers going like 130 kilometers an hour.
Wouldn't that just make them sail like way over the net? Like wouldn't that just like wouldn't that make them like just like way like go all over the place?
They're made of stones, so if you hit them hard enough, they blow up. And explosions are always fun.
Oh, you know what? It's just Mario. It's just bombs. Like it's sometimes the puck just turns.
If you hit it too hard, it blows up, and then a new one drops from the sky from randomly.
It doesn't actually hurt the players that it explodes next to. They just fall over, and then you just see stars over their head going like, "Whoa!" And then they get up. But like it gives you enough time to maybe skate in and score. That's exactly. That's God. You've Cody. You've
solved it again.
You've done it. New commissioner.
Just a closing thought before we, I guess, kind of close out here. But the Tortorella thing, for Canucks fans, obviously, who after, a first quarter of the season that was just completely miserable and had no upside to it, the last thing that the league could ever have is rules that prevent fun, because for Canucks fans, even though the team still looks a little rough on the analytics side, they're getting some incredible goaltending, and without it, they'd probably just be just as bad as they were in the first quarter of the season. But they're surviving off of fun, and having people like John Tortorella in positions where they can influence the game or the direction of the game by saying we shouldn't have more fun things. That's the worst thing for people like Canucks fans. We just want the fun. Give us the fun goals. Give us the give us the Forsberg as much as possible. That's all we need. You don't need to ruin it for everybody.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, it's good for the sport to see more talented players getting opportunities. You want a league where where instead of talking about how we've got 3 line, we went from a sport. Well, here's the thing: we literally went from a sport in the last like half decade or like half century, where it used to be you had 2 scoring lines and 2 checking lines. Then it went to 3 scoring lines and 1 checking line, which is kind of where we're at now. And then, but we're very slowly getting closer and closer to the idea of what if we just didn't have a checking line? What if every team was the checking line and the scoring line
goals
at the same time? Exactly. And like,
and then Tyler Myers was a forward?
God, he should be. He's the right way. He should be right wing. He should be a right winger, and I think Bruce Boudreau might be the guy.
He might be the guy to bring Tyler Myers to the forward group.
Yeah, and that's what you want. And to tie a nice bow on this as well, like in terms of like happy thoughts and everything. Jim Rutherford, one of the things he mentioned today was how he prefers to have a team that plays with speed, that works hard to forecheck on the forecheck, and then mentioned how the best defensemen on your team are the guys who can go get the puck and bring it back out. And he mentioned specifically that in regards to Quinn Hughes and how he sees Quinn Hughes. What makes Quinn Hughes a special player is the fact that he stops defensive. He's good defensively by not by being able to beat people to pucks and race it back out into the other zone again. Like that's the kind of stuff that we want the Canucks to be. We want them to be a team that plays with quick pace and plays with that kind of speed and entertaining hockey. So yeah, that bodes very well for the future, and hopefully we're gonna get to talk about that a whole lot more in the coming seasons.
Yeah, and Jim Rutherford basically said, "Don't get too attached to Tucker Pullman." And for a podcast like ours, that's wonderful to hear. And if you want to hear more of us talking about Tucker Pullman, you can check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Podbean, all your favorite podcasting platforms, including our YouTube channel, where everything is uploaded in video format. We also have our Patreon, where we have $1 and $5 tiers, where we push out exclusive content only for you. You'll get to learn about upcoming future guests that only you yourself will know about ahead of time. You can get your questions in to those guests ahead of time so that you're featured on our episodes. I am Cody Sievertson. You can find me on Twitter at Cody Sievertson. My website, ahlnucksharvest.com. I think my Instagram handles the same thing for that site. Lachlan, where can they find your work?
You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Lock in the Crease, and you can check out my writing work at Canucks Army. I'm working on a couple of things right now, so those might be out soon, and those will be out sooner rather than later. So go check those out, and then of course follow us on our Twitter account at the CreaseCast, and follow us on Instagram and also I guess TikTok now because we're so
TikTok famous. Make us TikTok money.
Make us that TikTok money. Maybe I can. I have been working very hard to convince Cody to make a TikTok, and I don't know if we make. How about this? If we get to 1 million followers on TikTok,
if it can pay for me to not have to work a full-time job, I'm all for it.
You'll start dancing for TikTok. I promise you there are more than just dancing. I promise you there are more than just dancing TikToks. But yeah, I guess we'll follow us on both of those at just CreaseCast. Just at CreaseCast.
Yeah. Until then, folks, we'll catch you on the next episode. Jacob will be with Lachlan for episode 162, and I'll be back for 163. Bye, everybody. See ya.
Bye.